Hey guys, sorry I can't be there today with you, but thought I would make this video to help you with some of chapters 5 and 6, and you could take some notes in your discussion section for 5.5. So this is the map, of course, the beginning of the book, and chapter 5, the current episode of to prevent flare-ups is Benji in his not-so-empty house when his parents are home. And that's really what Chapter 5 revolves around. It's really just one Saturday at Benji's house. Reggie's at work at Burger King. We still haven't seen Elena in the current timeline. She is the older sister who's in college. But Benji's parents are home, and his dad is going to make his famous barbecue. And Benji's trying to kind of kill the time until Bobby comes to pick him up, and his plan is to go off with Bobby and meet those new girls, the cousins that they've that he's been hearing about. Okay, so that's chapter 5, and chapter 6 is I'm forgetting the name of it. It's the Great American Beatboxers. Let's see here. Breathing tips of Great American Beatboxers. Yeah. So chapter 6 takes place near Johnny Waffle. We're not sure exactly where Bayside is, the club. It's not actually on the map, but of course, Johnny Waffle is where Benji works and where he sees Lisa and the members of UTFO come in during one of his shifts, and they're going to play the big end of the summer concert at Bayside, the club that the kids have been trying to get into all summer. You got to be 18 though to get into Bayside, and so they have to make some kind of plans to get in since they are not 18, besides Randy. Okay, so let's take a look at the discussion questions. The first question is, why does it take 192 pages to meet Benji's parents in the current timeline, and what is the effect? So the idea, if we go back to that prompt that you looked at for the last essay and that you're going to look at again for next week's essay, unconventional order of events. Well, this is an unconventional order of event in that we meet Benji's parents in the beginning of the book. They're driving the family to Sag Harbor, and on page 17. But after that, they are not part of the current timeline whatsoever until page 192. We hear about them coming home and not noticing Benji's injury at the end of chapter 4, but there's no dialogue, no description, no specifics about either person until chapter 5. And we finally meet them, and we learn a lot about Benji's parents in chapter 5. So think about why Whitehead would do this, why he would choose to wait nearly 200 pages to introduce these very important characters. What is the effect? Is it to show how empty that empty house, the kids with the empty house is? Is it to show that the kids are raising themselves to a certain extent during these summers at Sag Harbor, where they don't have a lot of parental involvement? Question number 2 is, how is the family like or unlike the family from The Cosby Show? And we hear about this several times in the book. He talks about it. It's right at the very beginning of chapter 5, calling them like The Cosby Show. And I think double consciousness comes into play here. He comes back to it at another point, and then at the very end of the chapter, we hear again about the family being like the Cosby Show. The Cosby Show is problematic for a few different reasons for Benji. In 1985, he tells us that it is the #1 show, and that's correct. Nationwide, it's the #1 show. But he says that it was different for him and his family to watch the Benji Show because the Cosby Show, because they had a lot in common with the Huxtables, the family on the Cosby Show. It wasn't like watching some faraway events. It was like watching people that they knew, who they knew. And that was problematic because the other shows that he was watching, he could look at from a distance, kind of laugh at them. All of the predominantly white-led shows, he could kind of make fun of, like, who would do that? Nobody I know would act that way, right? But with the Cosby Show, it's different because those were people who he knew, who looked like him and his family. After all, his dad is a doctor, his mom is a lawyer. And that's the case as well for the Huxtables. On 224, on the bottom of the page, the last paragraph, Benji says, "The Cosby Show cornered us, forcing us to reconsider our position." That was some version of ourselves on the screen there, after so long. My mother told us that when she was growing up, whenever a black face appeared on television, you ran through the house to tell everyone, and they dropped what they were doing and gathered around the RCA. I'm going to skip a few lines. My generation, top of 225, had Good Times, 6 seasons, and Baby I'm Back, 1/4 of a season, shows that honestly depicted how the black community lived in this country. Like what to do when the heat goes off in the projects in the middle of the winter. How to sort things out when your deadbeat husband returns after 7 years with a jaunty Baby I'm Back. Hence the title. The practical matters of the black day-to-day, don't you know? Me and Reggie and Elena tuned in, making room on the couch to verify that we didn't exist, while my father restrained himself from kicking in the set. That's not how we live. Cosby presented a problem. What did it mean when millionaires said, "I'm going for a little bit of that Cosby thing," standing there in some effed up sweater, hungering for validation after all they'd accomplished? If a sitcom had this much influence, then there was nothing to make fun of. Such things were possible. The box contained things of value. Where did that leave us when we looked around our own houses? The reception was terrible. So here we hear about how Benji isn't really able to see himself on the screen. Represented the events that happen in the Cosby Show don't reflect what happens in his world, even though those are the characters who most directly connect to his life, his situation, his identity as a rich or upper class black person with professional parents living in 1985. We also hear about how they are a made-for-TV family, and he comes back to this at the end of the chapter on page 232. We were a made-for-TV family, and when he called action, we hit our marks and delivered our lines like pros. The scripts were all the same. We had the formula down. And so we see a couple examples, I think, of double consciousness happening here. One is in the fact that Benji's looking for himself on the TV screen and doesn't see it. So looking at himself through the eyes of others is really what we're looking at when we look for double consciousness. But then in this case, they're thinking about how they look, as if they are the actors on the TV screen. And this is the way that Benji explains his dad runs the family home, as if they're on screen or on stage and they're being watched. And by the end of the chapter, though, he says that this isn't the case, right? Nobody is really watching. if you move to the middle of 232, for all his fear that people were watching all the time, that people will talk about you unless you're vigilant about what they see, no one was watching at all. No one cares about what goes on in other people's houses, the grubby dramas. It was just us. The soundstage was empty, the production lot scheduled for demolition. They'd turned off the electricity long ago. We delivered our lines in the darkness. And so everything that they're doing seems like it is for no purpose by the end. There's no reason to worry about looking a certain way, acting a certain way, because nobody's watching. After getting to know Benji's dad a little bit, it's pretty clear why Benji prefers watching Road Warrior instead of sitcoms or anything with talking. He says all of the violence and the lack of dialogue is preferable to him because he is really stressed out, anxious all of the time over what his dad's going to say and how his dad might flare up, right? To prevent flare-ups literally is talking about the dad cooking chicken on the grill, barbecuing chicken, and preventing those big flare-ups of fire. But figuratively, it is when the dad becomes angry, right? And the whole chapter is Benji navigating like when his dad's going to flare up. And he uses his analytical tool of observation through listening, described through auditory imagery of the poomp talk and those different sounds that are made as the father gets more and more drinks. And he realizes that the more drinks he has, the more possibility is of a flare-up, right? The taxonomy is kind of fun. We hear about this in this chapter as well. We hear about it in chapter 6. I had to check that again. But the taxonomy, we'll get to in one sec. My question is, where would you classify the dad? So think about the different things that the dad does in this chapter. It starts off with the fact that he refers to Reggie. He gives Reggie a new name. So make sure you take a look at those details. I think it's right away on 193. He calls Reggie basically a swear word, right, for a year. You know, what effect would that have on someone to not be called by their parent their real name for a year and instead be called, you know, a curse word? Well, we see the effect in this chapter that Reggie takes every shift he possibly can get at Burger King when his parents are home. So he's out of there. He tries to stay away. Benji, instead, is trying to prevent flare-ups in whatever way he can by, you know, listening to the sounds, shaking hands with people the right way, taking into account any, what does he call it? Any variable that might happen during the day that might make him upset later on. Rogue variables is what he calls them on page 210. All right, so I guess the last thing I want to say about chapter 5 is by the end of the chapter, we learn, you know, Whitehead does this thing often where he bookends the chapter with similar things. So at the beginning of the chapter, we hear about how Benji got this messed up haircut every time from his dad. And there was some conflicting feelings there because Benji liked spending that time with his dad and he liked getting that haircut. But as soon as he went to sleep or took a shower the next day, he saw that his hair was not cut well. It was all a facade. It was not very well cut. And instead realizes that the underlying principle is revealed as counterfeit, right? It was just kind of shaped to look good in the meantime, but the hair must not have been cut the same lengths, and so it didn't look good after the fact. The other underlying principle revealed as counterfeit, or something that's a facade, has a fake exterior, is the fact that the barbecue's not even any good. By the time all of that preparation, all of the cooking, and him blowing up the mom for getting the wrong plates, all of that happens, Benji bites into the chicken and it tastes like sand. So it's not even any good. So think about where you would put the dad according to Benji's taxonomy. The taxonomy comes on pages 241 to 243, 263, 266. I don't know if any of you have played D&D. My kids like D&D. I'd never played it until they did. But the character taxonomy is an important aspect. Here's one way to explain it. In this chart here, we've got lawful good, neutral good, chaotic good. Lawful neutral, true neutral, chaotic neutral. Lawful evil, neutral evil, chaotic evil. And you can see some examples, on this page here. I maybe even have another one. No, I think that's all that I have. This is the Ent from the Hobbit movies. What were those movies called? And he says, "Side, I'm on nobody's side because nobody is on my side." At any rate, my question was, where would you put Benji's dad? I don't know, maybe here. I don't know. It's sort of like when he drinks, maybe he gets closer to this end, right? But this is another tool that Benji uses to try to analyze his world using the D&D taxonomy. And he thinks about this a lot of times when people are acting a certain way and he's trying to kind of figure out why or what the deal is, what's going to happen next. And he thinks, oh, he's chaotic neutral, or he's chaotic evil. By the end of chapter 6, he realizes that there's something that's just plain evil, no descriptor needed. And he says that it's how Uncle Nelson has been treated by his dad, who they call Uncle Gideon, which is he's been told to never step foot in his house again. He also finds, though, a good thing, something that is good without a qualifier, simply good, and that is dancing at Bayside. Yes, he gets in. How does he get in? Well, it ends up being kind of anticlimactic, like everything else in this book. He just gets in because he's with NP and they ask the right person at the right time, and they don't even check his ticket. Once he's in, he kind of loses NP, and he finds himself in a group of people where he realizes they're all kind of freaks. They're all kind of out of place. Nobody really cares about how they look to each other. And so I think I put some of those quotes in your packet. I'm going to find one right now. Yeah, on 257, I think is a good spot to look at that. You know, he feels really awkward. He's dressed up. He dressed preppy because he thought that would help him get in. So he's feeling awkward in the clothes that he chose, but then also he you know, just feels awkward because he's Benji. But about 2/3 of the way down the page, 257, I felt like a giraffe with my 3 extra inches of height, but I fit right in with the freakish menagerie around me. A menagerie is a collection of animals, exotic animals. And so he's the giraffe, but there's other weird animals around him. And he describes all of them, and I won't read all of that. You can. But he also says on 263 that something good was about to happen. This is before the bands actually start. He realizes that it's not so much about the bands, but just really about being in this place where everybody wanted to be, right? I just had to wait. Weird trendoids surrounded me, fearsome geezers, drugged out wackos, but now we were comrades. We were all there for the same thing. The DJ hovered above us, throwing down his thunderbolts. He mixed in a segment of Debbie Harry singing Rapture, and they screamed. Actually, I decided I'm not dancing that badly at all. I thought, this is good. No qualifier, chaotic or otherwise, simply good. And so he's found kind of his an identity here, hasn't he? Of being, you know, someone who's enjoying the show, not minding being a freak in the freakish menagerie. He's found friends amongst the weirdos, and he doesn't feel so self-conscious anymore. And so that's kind of nice to see for Benji. Then let's see. He contrasts this feeling good with the evil, which is then he describes the night before when they were riding around in the car with Bobby and Uncle Gideon. And I've already mentioned that. And I guess as far as how he's finding his place, you know, he didn't end up with one of the girls here. He didn't even have the right song lyrics. You got to understand how hard it was to figure out what people were saying on songs before the internet. I know you don't want to hear it, but you guys, it was a different world. And so I put in a couple slides here about the song that he thought he knew the lyrics. He thought he was all sophisticated, and he understood how the rapper was using language, but he was totally off. Anyway, he's wrong about the lyrics. He's wrong about about how he's going to get into the concert. He doesn't get to hang out with the girls, but at the same time, he is one of he's one of them, right? He's one of the people at the club enjoying themselves. So on page 260, and I have this in your packet, mishearing song lyrics, making your specific travesty of the words is the right of every human being. Getting socked in the nuts, the dungeon, these were metaphors that made a lot of sense to me. And so he hears those metaphors in the songs. He hears sacroiliac instead of what it actually is, right? The part of the hip joint. Let's see if I can get this thing to move. And he says it's the right of every human. And you know, he's okay with that even though he's wrong. So the song is the message from Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, and it's in the announcements, and so you can look at all the lyrics and watch and listen to the song. It's amazing. You'll probably recognize it after you hear it. But here's he thinks he hears sacroiliac, but it's sacroiliac joint, which of course I love that he learns straight from the mouth of the UTFO rapper who comes into Johnny Waffle. There's also something about Roxanne at the beginning. If you want to check that out, you sure can. I have a YouTube video explaining what the whole situation is and the actual two songs that were the biggest sort of output of the Roxanne Wars, but that's just if you're interested, okay? Here's Lisa Lisa and the Cult Jam, their big song. All right, so you can check all that stuff out on your own. And let's see. I think, did we deal with all of the... Oh, and then I guess the last quote about finding his place is in the packet too. It's on 262. No one looked at me. I was one of them on the dance floor, and they were one of me. I was jostled in turn. Collision as communication. I am here. We're here together. And so just being part of the group, being part of that community is his identity, and he doesn't have to be anything beyond that. And that's what is pretty cool for him in this chapter. Okay, sorry I wasn't there today, and I hope I feel better tomorrow. And love you, miss ya.